What do you at, ladies and gentlemen? Lycos here, and today I'm going to be talking about a beginner's guide on builds, loot farming for those builds once you reach endgame. I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I'm going to be talking about the attributes for the builds, talents for the builds, weapons that you can use, and talents on those weapons. Alright, let's talk about attributes. Let's start with the damage attributes. Weapon damage and damage to elites are the most important in my opinion. Headshot damage, crit chance, and crit damage, those all depend on your playstyle. Like if you really like to go for a lot of headshots, obviously headshot damage is great, and then crit chance is really good on particular builds, just crit chance specific builds. Let's move on to the defensive attributes. Bonus armor, health, and hazard protection are the most important here in my opinion. Health on kill again is good, very specific for very specific builds. Now skill power. Skill power is a little bit tricky. It's a little underpowered right now as far as I'm concerned, but it is quite powerful in very specific builds. I'll talk about that a little later on in the video. But as a general rule, I'll show you what I like to do when it comes to skill power. Basically all I do with skill power is I look at my mods that I want to have on my skills, and then I just meet the requirements of those mods that I want to have. And that's it. Like if you want to go with a skill power build, your mods will make your skills quite a bit more powerful. That's what you want to be concerned about. So just look at the mods, see which ones you like the most, and just meet the skill power. Try to meet the skill power of the mods that you want to have on there. That's pretty much all I've got to say about skill power. I really hope that they do a little more with skill power in the future, get a little more buffs, but that's about it for skill power. Alright, let's talk about specific armor pieces and the attributes and talents that I like to have on those pieces. Alright, let's talk about the mask. In my opinion, damage to elites is the most important as far as PvE goes. Even in the dark zone, if you're in there, damage to elites comes in handy for sure. That is by far above and beyond anything else that I would recommend for your mask. There are some other ones that are okay, like health is okay on there. Hazard protection is nice, especially if you can get something like this that has quite a bit of damage to elites and then a ton of hazard protection as well. Health on kill is okay as well, but there's not really a lot to say about the mask. I usually always go for as much damage to elites as possible. Alright, let's talk about the chest piece. The chest piece is great. It has really great attributes that you can get on it and really great talents. As far as the attributes go, bonus armor is great, weapon damage great, health is great, and then if you're trying for a specific skill power build, the chest piece is a great place to have skill power on, because you can get some really high rolls on skill power on your chest piece. Now if you look here as well, you can get specific chest pieces that have only like 2 attributes on it, just like this one, the Alp Summit Armament chest piece. And you can see there I have a really high roll on bonus armor, so it really comes in handy for these specific chest pieces. If you look down here a little further, you can see I've got 21% critical hit chance on the attribute. So some of these chest pieces are really good for that. As far as the talents go, they have some of the best talents for the gear pieces. Unbreakable I really like for 25% max armor once your armor is depleted, so it just gives you that little bit of survivability. I also really like Bloodsucker, gives you also survivability. As you're taking down the armor of the enemy, you're getting more and more bonus armor on yourself. That's a really great talent as well. Unstoppable Force, this is another excellent talent, especially if you have a build that has a really high armor. Killing an enemy grants 2% weapon damage for every 10,000 max armor. That's excellent for anyone. It's good for any build at all, but it's particularly good if you have a really high armor build. Now those are my favorite talents to have on a chest piece. especially for someone who is just starting out, just trying to get their first build together. Now you have to keep in mind that for Unstoppable Force and for Bloodsucker you need to have 7 or more defensive stats. That's usually pretty easy to get, especially when you're building your first build. I would recommend that you go with quite a few defensive stats. So yeah, that should be no problem for you to get, but just keep in mind that you have to have that in order to unlock those talents. Let's move on to the holster. Let's talk about attributes. Now, perhaps I've just been very unlucky, but I haven't seen a single holster with weapon damage, and I haven't seen a single holster with bonus to armor. But you still can get some very good attributes on the holster. Like you can see here, I've 16,400 health. That's a very good attribute to have on there. You can also get some very high critical hit chance on the holster. You can get skill power. It's a decent spot to have a little extra skill power. But there's nothing crazy about the holster. Anything like health or critical hit chance is pretty decent to have on your holster. As far as the talents go, there's only a couple here that I really like to have on the holster. Devastating is great for the weapon damage. Headshot with precise is good, especially if you're going for a headshot build. And damage to elites is always great, as I was saying before. Hard hitting is always great to have on any piece of gear. Let's talk about your backpack. There's some pretty nice attributes that you can get on your backpack. Weapon damage is nice, health, bonus armor. You can even get some skill power on your backpack, so the attributes are pretty good as far as the backpack goes. But what I really want to talk about is the talents. There's some extremely nice talents that you can get on your backpack. Earlier on I was talking about specific skill power builds, and this on the ropes talent works perfectly with the skill power build. You need to get 7 skill attributes, but once you do, on the ropes, weapon damage is increased by plus 25% while all skills are on cooldown. With specific skills, this works amazingly. Okay, so say particular, I like to use it with a pulse and with my chem launcher heal. It works great with that. I hit the chem launcher heal a couple of times, hit the pulse, and pretty soon everything is on cooldown and I'm doing plus 25% extra damage. So yeah, on the ropes is an amazing talent for the right build. There's so many other talents that are really, really great on the backpack. You can get hard hitting for extra damage to elites. You can get hardened plus 10% armor. That's a really nice one as well. Safeguard. I really, really like Safeguard for specific builds as well. You need to have 5 or less damage attributes, but if you do, killing a target grants 150% bonus to repairing and healing effects for 20 seconds. For any build, this is a good talent to have, but for healing specific builds, this is amazing. Safeguard, extremely good talent. Let's talk about the gloves. Gloves are a great place to get a lot of extra weapon damage. As you can see here, I have 11% assault rifle damage. You can get some really high damage rolls for any particular weapon that you want to use. 11% assault rifle damage is absolutely amazing. As far as talents go, there isn't a whole lot. I have clutch on this. Clutch is good if you are running a critical hit build. Critical hits restore 15% health and repair 2% armor. Really, the only reason that I'm running these particular gloves though is for the extra assault rifle damage. I would rather have something like hard hitting here, and that's what I would definitely recommend for anyone that's just starting out building your build, is to get damage to elites. 15% damage to elites is amazing, but then the extra weapon damage as well. If you can get one with extra weapon damage and damage to elites, that's definitely what I would recommend. That's an amazing combination. Like I said, if you're going for a crit build, clutch is a very nice thing to have. Headshot, you can also get headshot damage, which is pretty nice. But yeah, the gloves are pretty simple, pretty straightforward. go for that weapon damage, and I would recommend go for the damage to elites. Alright, last up we got the knee pads. I won't spend too much time on the knee pads, they're pretty straightforward. Attributes are pretty good here. You've got bonus to armor is good, you got extra health, critical hit chance is not bad. As far as the talents go, there's only a couple of decent talents that you can get on the knee pads in my opinion. Patience is an extremely good one to get if you're going for the more defensive build. You get the 7 defensive attributes or more. Patience after being in cover for 3 seconds. Armor repairs 5% every 1 second. This talent is a great one to have on your first build. I've used it on several different builds. It definitely comes in handy. Getting that heal when you're in cover, especially in PvE, is very, very good. You can also get damage to elites is pretty good here. If I was going to recommend one set of knee pads for your first build, I would recommend Gilligard, because it has a good attribute bonus. You can get patience on here, which I think is very, very good, and then you get the 2 defensive mods, which really help you get extra if you're going for that defensive build. Now this is mostly if you're going for a defensive build. Now I think that this is good even if you're not going for more of a defensive build, but yeah, Gilligard knee pads for your first build, this is probably the knee pads that I would recommend the most. Now you may have noticed that I haven't talked at all about sets or the set bonuses, and that's because they're really not all that important, especially not for your first build that you're making. Yes, there are some. You definitely do want to look at whatever bonus it is that you're getting from the particular set that you're wearing. If you can have a piece of gear that is a specific set that benefits the build that you're going for, great. If not, really not that big of a deal. You do not need to be looking for a very specific set for the particular build that you're going for. In my opinion, especially for your first build that you're going for, your attributes and your talents are much more important on your pieces of gear. Yes, if you can get that extra perk from the set that you're wearing, that's great, but focus on your attributes and your talents first off. Now you can see here I have the Fenris group chest piece on because it gives me that extra assault rifle damage. But if you look at my mask, I have explosive damage. It really does basically nothing for the particular build that I'm running here, but it has a whole lot of extra elite damage, 34% elite damage. That's the best elite damage that I have on any of my masks. I also have hard hitting on this mask, which gives me even more elite damage, and that's what I was going for. I was going for as much elite damage as I could get on a particular piece of gear, so the explosive damage really didn't matter. So as far as the sets go for your first build, like I said, I wouldn't focus on the sets too much. Focus on the attributes and the talents first, and then if you can get the set bonuses to go along with those attributes and talents to benefit your build, great. But don't be too concerned about the actual sets themselves, especially not for your very first build. Let's talk about weapons. I'm going to go through each different weapon type, tell you the weapons that I like the best in those weapon types, and afterwards I'll go over the talents that I like on my weapons. Let's talk about ARs first. ARs I've used by far the most in this game. I really like them. They're very versatile weapons. They're great at close range, medium range, and even quite good at long range as well. The ones that I like the most in the ARs, Custom P416 is great, the Police M4 is great, and recently I've started using the Military AKM. I really like this weapon. It's my own personal preference, but I think this is an extremely good weapon to use. Moving on to the SMGs, I haven't used the SMGs much at all. I know that they're very good in PvP. They're good at close range. There's some very good vectors. Vector seems to be the king of the SMG right now. So yeah, that's about it for the SMGs. You can get the exotic Chatterbox. It's pretty easy to get, and it's a pretty good weapon as well. Moving on to the LMGs, I'd stick to the 100 round mag LMGs, the classic M60, and then there's the military M60, which is the one that I like to use the most, but you can't go wrong with either the classic M60 or the military M60. It's very good at close range, medium range, and okay at long range. It's also a very versatile weapon. It's the reason why I like the LMG so much. Shotguns, I haven't used shotguns a whole lot. They're incredibly great at close range. This particular weapon, the SPAS 12, is the one that I've used the most in the shotguns. It does a crazy amount of damage. It's very, very good close range weapon. Moving on to the marksman rifles. There's a couple of different marksman rifles that I like, but the ones that I like the most are the hunting M44 and then the Model 700. I like both of these weapons. Amazing for long range. Very good at medium range as well. I usually use my marksman rifles without a scope on them. I just usually have a sight. They're also extremely good in PvP. If you've seen any of the one-shot builds out there, they're very good for PvP, but they're an extremely good all-around weapon for sure. As for the rifles, I like the classic M1A and the police MK17. Both really, really great weapons. The police MK17 is a much higher rate of fire. It also does good damage. Classic M1A is a little slower, but it does some really, really nice damage. Rifles are very good at long range, good at medium range. It's an excellent, I've used rifles quite a bit. It's an excellent weapon type for sure. And the Merciless as well, it's another exotic. You can get that one from farming a particular group of bosses, the hyena bosses, and it's actually not too difficult to get, and it's also a very good weapon to have holstered on your back, but it's also a decent weapon in its own. And that's pretty much it for the different weapon types. Alright, let's go over the weapon talents real quick. Red Basket is one I've used quite a bit. Landing a body shot gives you extra headshot damage once you land a headshot. Preservation, killing an enemy repairs 5% armor over 3 seconds. Headshot kills improves the repair. It's pretty nice for survivability. Close and personal, killing a target within 7 meters grants plus 50% weapon damage for 5 seconds. Really nice for up close and personal fights, which there are a decent amount of in the Division 2. Then you got Optimus. This is another one that I really like. Weapon damage is increased by plus 3% for every 10% ammo missing from the magazine. The more you fire, the more damage you're doing. Rangers, good for long range. Every 5 meters you are from the target, grants plus 2% weapon damage. Great for the snipers out there. And lastly, we've got Strained, plus 10% critical hit damage is gained for every 5% of your armor that is depleted. Good for critical hit chance builds. Yeah, pretty good. This is a pretty good talent, but very specific to critical hit chance builds. Alright, before we move on to the loot farming portion of the video, I want to give you an example of an easily acquired first time build. This is very close to the build that I had first when I started making my builds. For this build, I'm going with an AR and an LMG. Any of the ARs that I talked about earlier will work fine in this build, and the 2 LMGs that I talked about earlier as well will work really good in this build. Alright, let's talk about the mask. You'll notice that the gear score on the mask is only 450. You need to be concerned with your stats first and then your gear score later. Gear score is really not that important. On the mask I got a bunch of elite damage for this particular build. That's what I was looking for. Tons of elite damage on the mask. Going to the chest piece, I'm using an AR, so I wanted as much assault rifle damage as possible, so I went with the Fenris group. I got health, weapon damage, bonus armor. Then I went with the Unbreakable for a little extra survivability. Very nice in your first build. And then extra damage to elites. This is mostly a PvE build, you'll notice. Okay, so for the holster, we've got extra health, critical hit chance, which doesn't really matter on this build, and extra weapon damage. I could have went with extra elite damage here as well. It probably would have been better than the weapon damage. But this is just to show you like an example of a build. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be perfect at all. Okay, we got extra weapon damage on the backpack, health, critical hit chance. We got a little bit of extra armor for that extra survivability. Here we've got a whole bunch more assault rifle damage because we're running the AR. Critical hit chance restore 5% health and repair 2% armor. That it just happened to be on this particular set of gloves. This glove had a whole bunch of assault rifle damage. That's what I went with it for. The clutch really doesn't matter. And then the Fenris group, bonus to armor, and then I had the patience, so I wanted to go with at least 7 or more defensive talents. So I wanted to go with the Fenris just to get those extra defensive talents. Now I'm sure you've noticed that this is not a perfect build. Perfect builds are pretty hard to come by in this game. You have to farm a whole lot to get the perfect build in this game. I wanted to show you a good quality build that you can easily get early on and that'll serve you really, really well. And I think that this is an example of a very good build that will do that for you. Now let's talk about the skills for a second. I went with the Chem Launcher Heal for this build, and I went with the Hive Reviver. These skills are very versatile. You could go with several other different skills. Like the skills don't really matter when it comes to this build, but these 2 skills in particular I think are very versatile and they'll serve you well in a lot of different circumstances. Now at the end of the video I'm going to showcase this build going through a challenging mission just so you can get an idea of just how good the build is. And so yeah, stick around for that if you want to check out the build at the end. Alright, farming for your builds. I'm going to talk about several different farming methods, but there's a couple that I think that are most important above all else when you first reach endgame. And one of those is farming control points. Getting the control point up to alert level 3. How you do that is you take out the activities that are connected to the control point. You'll see there's a faint red line there. That means it's connected to the control point. So you take out the activities that are connected to it and you get it up to control point alert level 3. You take out that control point, then you'll get a good amount of gear and you'll also get a blueprint. The other activity that I want to talk about is bounties. You can see all the bounties on your map here. The bounties will give you an excellent amount of gear, and they will also give you points towards your specialist. And those are the 2 that I would recommend the most first when you reach endgame, because you're getting really good amounts of gear from the control points and from the bounties, and you're also getting your blueprints for your mods, and then you're also getting from your bounties, you're getting your specialist points. There are a couple other farming methods that I want to talk about that I use fairly often, and one of those is farming the hard missions. Those you can get through pretty easily, pretty quickly, and they give you a really good amount of loot at the end. And the final thing that I want to talk about, I know it's not for everyone, but it's farming the Dark Zone. Especially once you reach Dark Zone level 50, you'll start getting the Dark Zone caches, and then it becomes extremely lucrative with gear drops. You get a great amount of loot from the Dark Zone caches. I know that the Dark Zone is definitely not for everyone, but it is an excellent way to get loot. I would not recommend the occupied Dark Zone. That's my own personal preference. I think that it's too much trouble for what it's worth. And now if you have a really good, well-geared 4-man team to go in there, then yes, it can be extremely lucrative for gear drops. But under most circumstances, I would not recommend the occupied Dark Zone. But for the regular Dark Zone, I do that on a regular basis. I get a great amount of loot from it. Rogues can be a bit of a pain sometimes, but but still, it's still a great way of getting loot, and I use it on a regular basis. Alright everyone, that's it for this video. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I hope you got some useful information out of this video. If you did, please hit that like button, please subscribe, and stay tuned if you want to see me testing out this build, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Bye everyone.